The camera opens on a young man slumped at a library desk, papers scattered around him, his head buried in his hands. His eyes are red from exhaustion, his shoulders heavy with defeat. In a shaky voice, he whispers, "I thought being born into wealth meant life would be easier. But money couldn't buy me the one thing I needed most, success in my own mind. And it took a girl no one noticed, someone from a world so different from mine, to teach me the secret that finally changed everything." The story begins months earlier, when that young man's life was unraveling. His name was Colton Hayes, the only son of Donovan Hayes, a billionaire who had built a vast empire of construction companies and high-end development stretching across the country. Colton lived in a mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie, with more rooms than he could count and cars parked in the driveway that most people only dreamed of. But none of it mattered. Beneath the luxury, Colton carried a burden no one could see. He failed every test he took. From grade school through college, academics were his worst enemy. His report cards were filled with red ink, and his tutors rotated so quickly that the staff at his home joked about installing a revolving door. To outsiders, Colton looked lazy, careless, even spoiled. But inside, he was drowning. He stayed up nights trying to memorize pages, writing notes until his hands cramped, only for his mind to go completely blank when the test arrived. Words jumbled, numbers danced, and all he heard was silence and the cruel whisper of failure. His father had no patience for it. Donovan Hayes was a man who prided himself on grit and intellect. He had started with nothing, laying bricks on construction sites as a teenager before clawing his way to the top of the industry. He didn't believe in excuses. "You're wasting your life, Colton," Donovan thundered one evening across the long marble dining table. "I built everything from the ground up. And you? You can't even pass a simple exam. How do you expect to lead what I've created?" Colton had no answer. Shame wrapped around him like chains. His mother, gentle and kind, tried to defend him, but Donovan's disappointment was louder than her comfort. Night after night, Colton retreated further into himself. He skipped social events, avoided his father's eyes, and spent his time doodling in sketchbooks or strumming his guitar, two places where failure didn't follow him. Then came the breaking point. After flunking yet another assessment for a business program his father insisted he join, Donovan's temper exploded. He slammed the test on his desk, his voice echoing through the house. "You are embarrassing me. Investors whisper about my son being incompetent. Do you know what that does to my reputation?" Colton's chest tightened as though the walls were closing in. The office around him was lined with Donovan's trophies and framed awards, each one a reminder of a legacy Colton felt unworthy to inherit. He fled before the storm could continue, the word "embarrassing" carved into his mind. That evening, desperate for air, Colton left the mansion without his driver or flashy cars. Wearing a hoodie and jeans, he wandered aimlessly through the city streets until he ended up near a modest community center. Outside, a group of teenagers sat with books in their laps, solving problems, laughing as they compared answers. One young woman stood out. Her name was Tiana Brooks. She had deep brown skin that glowed beneath the streetlights and eyes filled with quiet fire. While others stumbled through their work, Tiana guided them patiently, explaining until their faces brightened with understanding. She wasn't just tutoring, she was transforming frustration into hope. Tiana didn't come from privilege. She worked part-time at a diner and babysat on weekends to help her mother cover bills. Yet, she gave her evenings to the community center, determined to lift others up through education. To her, knowledge wasn't just about grades, it was about freedom, about proving that circumstances didn't define you. Colton lingered nearby, watching her teach. He was struck by how effortlessly she broke down complex ideas, how her words carried encouragement instead of judgment. He thought about the endless tutors who had sighed, frowned, or given up on him. None of them had looked at him the way Tiana looked at her students, with genuine belief. He turned to leave, but fate intervened. A paper slipped from his backpack, drifting to the ground. Tiana noticed and picked it up before he could. Her eyes scanned the page, a test covered in red marks. When she looked up, she didn't smirk or pity him. She simply asked, "This yours?" Colton hesitated, heat rushing to his face. "Yeah," he muttered, reaching for it. "You struggled with this?" she asked gently. "I'm just not good at any of this," he admitted, shame weighing every word. But Tiana shook her head slowly. "Nobody's just bad at learning. You just haven't been taught in the way your mind works. Everyone has their own way of understanding things." The word stunned him. Simple, but powerful. He had spent years believing he was broken, stupid, or lazy. Tutors, teachers, even his father had drilled it into him. But this girl, a stranger from a world far different than his, saw something else entirely. That night, as he lay in his massive but lonely bedroom, her words wouldn't leave his head. Everyone has their own way of understanding. For the first time in years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't hopeless after all. The next day, Colton returned to the community center. Tiana was there again, surrounded by kids who laughed at her jokes as they worked through problems. When the crowd thinned, Colton finally found the courage to approach. "I think," he said, voice unsure, "I think I need help." Tiana studied him for a moment, her expression calm, unreadable. Then she nodded and said, "All right. But we'll take it one step at a time." And with that, a journey neither of them expected began. Colton sat down at one of the old wooden tables inside the community center. The room smelled faintly of books and floor polish, nothing like the sleek glass offices or private classrooms he was used to. Tiana set a notebook between them, her pen tapping softly as she studied him. "All right," she said, "tell me what happens when you look at a test." Colton hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. Tutors always dove straight into equations or essays, assuming he was just being lazy. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know. I study. I really do. But then the paper's in front of me, and everything just disappears. I forget it all. My brain goes blank." Tiana leaned forward, her voice gentle but serious. "So it's not that you don't know it. It's that your brain shuts down under pressure." Colton blinked. That was exactly it. "Yes. Exactly." She smiled. "Then we don't fix it by forcing you to memorize harder. We fix it by teaching your brain to stay calm, and to learn in a way that actually makes sense to you." For the first time, someone understood. Colton felt something stir in his chest, a small spark of hope. That evening, Tiana began with something simple. Instead of drilling him with problems, she asked him questions about his interests. Music. Sketching. The things he loved when no one was watching. She listened carefully, then started weaving the subjects into those passions. For math, she used rhythms and beats, connecting formulas to the way music flowed. For history, she compared events to stories and characters, like heroes and villains in a novel. Slowly, concepts that once felt impossible began to click. Colton stared at her in disbelief. "Why has no one ever taught me like this before?" "Because too many people think learning is one size fits all," Tiana replied. "But that's the secret, you've got to learn in the language your brain speaks." "And yours?" "It speaks creativity." Those words became the turning point. Over the next weeks, Colton returned to the community center almost every evening. He arrived quietly, slipping in without drawing attention, trading his expensive watches and tailored jackets for hoodies and sneakers so no one would see him as the billionaire's son. Here, he wasn't Colton Hayes, heir to a fortune. He was just a young man trying to figure things out. The sessions weren't easy. Some nights, he wanted to slam the books shut, frustration boiling over when old habits returned and his mind shut down. But Tiana never gave up on him. She stayed patient, reminding him to breathe, to slow down, to see the problem through a different lens. "Your brain isn't broken," she would say firmly. It just works differently. And that's not a weakness, it's a strength once you learn how to use it. Those words carried him through the hardest moments. Meanwhile, life at the Hayes mansion grew tense. Donovan grew more impatient, demanding results. "Why are you sneaking out every night?" he asked one evening, his voice sharp as steel. "If you're wasting time with those worthless hobbies instead of preparing for your future, you're going to regret it." Colton wanted to tell him the truth, that he was finally starting to learn in a way that made sense, that someone actually believed in him. But Donovan wouldn't understand. His father only respected results, not effort. So Colton kept his secret. It wasn't long before change started to show. At his next practice exam, Colton didn't freeze completely. His heart still pounded, but instead of blanking out, he remembered Tiana's advice. Break the problem into a rhythm, turn the words into a story, breathe. For the first time, he finished before the clock ran out. And when the score came back, it wasn't a failure. It wasn't perfect either, but it was passing. When he showed the result to Tiana, she grinned. "See? You're not failing. You're learning your way." Colton laughed, a sound that felt foreign after months of shame. "You don't know what this means to me." "Oh, I do," Tiana said softly. "Because I've been where you are. Everyone told me I wouldn't make it, that people like me don't go far. But the moment I realized my mind had value, just in a different way, I stopped listening to the noise. You need to do the same." Her words hit deeper than she probably knew. Colton had lived under the shadow of his father's expectations his entire life, convinced he would never measure up. But here was someone who had no reason to help him, no wealth to gain, no status to chase. And yet she believed in him more than anyone ever had. The more time he spent at the center, the more Colton's perspective began to shift. He saw kids who had nothing, no trust funds, no safety nets, yet worked twice as hard with smiles on their faces. He saw Tiana give her time freely, pouring everything into others, even when she herself was exhausted from working shifts to support her family. For the first time, Colton realized how small his world had been, trapped in a mansion of wealth that felt more like a cage. Weeks turned into months, and with every passing day, Colton grew stronger. His grades improved, but more importantly, so did his confidence. He stopped dreading tests. He began tackling problems with creativity, using the secret Tiana had taught him, that learning wasn't about fitting into a mold, it was about finding the key that unlocked your own mind. Yet, as his progress grew, so did the tension at home. Donovan began demanding to know why Colton was suddenly different. "Who's helping you?" he pressed one night. "No tutor of mine has reported these improvements." "What's going on?" Colton hesitated. If his father found out about Tiana, he feared Donovan would dismiss her instantly. To a man who measured worth in money, someone like Tiana, a young black woman from a struggling neighborhood, wouldn't count. So Colton kept her a secret, even as guilt tugged at him. One evening, after another breakthrough session, Colton lingered as the other students left. "Tiana," he said quietly, "why do you do this? Why spend your time here when you could be resting, working more hours, or just, living your life?" She paused, looking at him with steady eyes. "Because someone once did it for me. A teacher who saw potential when nobody else did. She taught me the secret I'm teaching you, that our minds are powerful if we learn how to trust them. I want to pass that forward. That's worth more than any paycheck." Colton swallowed hard. In that moment, he knew she wasn't just saving him from failure. She was showing him an entirely new way to live. And though neither of them realized it yet, the path they had begun would soon collide with his father's world, shaking the foundations of everything Colton had known. It happened sooner than Colton expected. One late evening, as he slipped back into the mansion after a tutoring session, his father was waiting in the living room. Donovan Hayes sat in an armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his sharp eyes tracking Colton's every move. "You've been hiding something," Donovan said flatly. "Where are you going every night?" Don't lie to me. Colton froze. His heart raced. For weeks he had kept Tiana a secret, afraid of this very moment. He thought about brushing it off, inventing another excuse, but for the first time in his life, he felt tired of lying. I've been getting help, Colton admitted carefully. From who? Donovan's voice cut like a blade. Colton hesitated, then finally said it. A girl named Tiana. She tutors at the community center. She's been teaching me in a way that actually works. Silence filled the room. Donovan's brows knitted together, his jaw tightening. A community center, he repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. So my son, heir to the Hayes Empire, is sneaking around with some volunteer? You expect me to believe that some nobody from the streets is the reason you've improved? Colton's fists clenched. His father's words pierced him, but this time, instead of shrinking back, he felt anger rising. She's not a nobody, Colton shot back, surprising even himself. She's the only person who's ever understood how I learn. She's the reason I passed my last test. The reason I finally believe I'm not broken. Donovan stood abruptly, his voice booming. You're making a fool of yourself. You think this girl cares about you? She sees your name, your money, she's using you. No. Colton's voice cracked, but it was steady with conviction. She doesn't even know who I really am. I never told her I'm your son. To her, I'm just Colton. And she still chose to help me. That's more than I can say for any of the tutors you hired. For the first time in years, Donovan was speechless. His son, quiet, insecure, always shrinking under his shadow, was standing tall, defending himself, defending someone else. But Donovan wasn't ready to listen. This ends now, he said coldly. You're done with this girl. You'll stick with professionals, with people who matter. I won't have you dragging our name through the dirt. Colton's chest tightened, but instead of caving, he met his father's glare. If you make me stop learning from her, you'll lose me completely. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Donovan's face hardened, but something flickered in his eyes, something he quickly masked with anger. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the room. That night, Colton lay awake, his heart pounding. He knew things would only get harder from here. The next day, he returned to the community center, his mind heavy with what had happened. Tiana noticed immediately. Something's wrong, she said. What is it? Colton sighed, running a hand through his hair. My father found out about you. He doesn't want me coming here anymore. Tiana looked at him quietly, her expression unreadable. So what are you going to do? Colton hesitated. His entire life, he had obeyed his father, even when it broke him. But now, sitting across from Tiana, he thought about everything she had given him, hope, confidence, a belief in himself he had never felt before. I'm going to keep coming, Colton said finally. His voice trembled, but it was filled with determination. For the first time in my life, I know I'm capable. I'm not giving that up. Tiana's lips curved into a small smile. Good. Because your success should never depend on someone else's permission. Over the next few weeks, Colton's progress accelerated. He scored higher on practice exams than he ever dreamed possible. He no longer panicked when tests were placed in front of him. He breathed, remembered Tiana's lessons, and trusted his mind. Then came the real test, his college entrance exam. The one his father had doubted he'd ever pass. The day of the test, Colton sat in the exam hall, hands trembling slightly. He closed his eyes and remembered Tiana's words, your brain isn't broken. Trust it. Learn in your own rhythm. He began. One question at a time, steady and calm. He used the rhythms of music, the stories of history, the patterns he had trained into himself. Hours later, when he put down his pen, he didn't feel crushed. He felt proud. Weeks later, the results arrived. Colton held the envelope in his hands, fear pressing against his chest. He ripped it open, and his breath caught. He had not only passed, he had scored higher than anyone expected. Tiana was the first person he told. At the community center, he handed her the results with a grin he couldn't hide. "I did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Tiana looked at the paper, then at him. Her smile was radiant. "No, Colton, you did it. I just helped you see it was always inside you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything, the failure, the shame, the years of doubt, lifted, leaving only joy. But one person still needed to hear it. That evening, Colton walked into his father's office and placed the results on his desk. Donovan picked up the paper, scanning it silently. His brows lifted slightly, surprise flickering across his stern face. "You passed," Donovan muttered. His voice was flat, but Colton caught the smallest crack in it, something almost like pride. "I passed because I found someone who believed in me when you didn't," Colton said firmly. "I'm not a disgrace. I'm not broken. I just needed to learn differently. And I'll never let anyone tell me otherwise again, not even you." Donovan looked at him, his jaw tightening. For the first time, Colton didn't look away. He stood tall, his heart steady. Whether or not his father approved no longer mattered. Because he finally believed in himself. The video returns to where it began, Colton, sitting in the library, speaking to the viewers. His voice is steady now, filled with strength. "All my life, I thought failure defined me. But the truth is, I just hadn't learned the secret yet, that every mind has its own rhythm, its own way of learning. Once you find it, nothing can stop you. And sometimes, the person who teaches you that secret isn't the one with all the money or power, it's someone who believes in you when no one else does." He pauses, his eyes glistening. "For me, that person was Tiana. And because of her, I finally believe I'm enough." The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with the powerful message: belief, patience, and finding your own way can change everything.